What's cracking, guys? Coach D here. Another episode of HansenAthletics Radio. Today, you're going to be going over a Twitter or X post that I made that, did pretty well with engagement, and just kind of cover this for coaches out there listening, athletes, parents. Want to know, number one, a little bit more about Hansen Athletics, but number two, kind of how we've evolved over the last 8 years. So for context, this one will probably be a 5 to 10 minute episode. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, I've been getting some great questions from listeners in terms of going a little bit deeper into these topics, which we can do via podcast, which we can do via DM, or just conversations off the webs, right? So jumping into it, for context, 5 years ago is when we really kind of got rolling with our physical location. This will be our 8th year, but the first couple of years we're in a garage, shared space at a PT clinic and whatnot. So once we kind of got to start doing the things that we wanted to do, we had come from a more traditional background, Sheldon and I. So, growing up in high school, doing a bigger, faster, stronger program, which probably half the country did, basically just lifting heavy all the time, maxing out a lot, power lifts pretty much 80% of the time. We came from that background. No formal speed work, no technical work when it came to sprinting or how to sprint faster. Fast forward, we get to I was at Utah State, Sheldon was at Weber, and having exposure and experience in those programs and seeing still a little bit of that boat was being missed. Like, there was a little bit more tempo days and whatnot, but we never really were taught how to sprint, nor did we do, now knowing what we know, true speed work. So spent time there. We're at the university there, learned what we could. I also coached the University of Utah for a little bit and in the weight room side. And then you realize, okay, back home we were missing some aspects of training. And that's kind of what stemmed me to move back to Pocatello and start up Hansen Athletics. Shelton and I kind of joined up right from the beginning, and we just implemented what we knew. So we were doing, a lot of lifting in a couple different manners than we did in high school. Looking a little bit more for bar speed, playing around with the velocity curve, profiling athletes based on how they lifted weights versus just lifting as heavy as they can. And that was kind of the extent of it. So came back, opened up. We had a lot of support immediately. We were doing a good job with what we knew at the time. Fast forward, we're getting great results with the athletes, but not necessarily seeing like as much of the carryover to the field as I wanted or Shelt wanted. And then number two, we kind of wanted to take it to that next level. Our mission has always been to bring world-class coaching to Pocatello, and we wanted to figure out ways to, help these kids get an advantage and be able to play college sports if they want to, or at least train in a performance way for the rest of their life. And like I said, we just weren't getting the results that we wanted. You have to keep in mind we're in a small town in southeastern Idaho. So, we're not always, we have some freaks that come out of here, but we're not always getting the most genetically gifted athletes per se. They sometimes are, tend to be a little bit small for that Division I sport level, particularly when it comes to like football, basketball. So when we look into it, it's like, what's a separating factor? What's something that can equalize the playing field that we can drive here in Pocatello and give our athletes a chance to play at the next level, whether that's more D2, JUCO, D1. And that's when we started to think speed, man. Like, speed is the great equalizer. If you don't have size, but you have a lot of speed, you can see a lot of success even at the professional level in sports. So we start diving into this thing, right? We, contacted Les Spellman. He was just about to do this new thing called Speed Lab. We were the first one to join back in the end of 2021. And that kind of marked our journey into the world of, sprint development, speed, change of direction, and whatnot. And man, what did we find? A lot of things. Number one, more of our kids were getting to the opportunity to play in college. So better performance on the field, more opportunities for our athletes. I mean, at this point, I'd say about 5 years in of actually, having a facility to do what we want, and then 3 years of really mastering and getting into the speed side. I mean, we've had over 130, 135 athletes from our area just at our gym have the opportunity to play a collegiate sport, which is huge. When I grew up here, there was like 2 or 3 that I knew of my whole graduating class, and maybe a couple from the other schools. So maybe like 5 or 6 total. And we're easily averaging, 15 to 25 per graduating class. And that's just getting bigger every year. Number one, we saw better results, right? And we learned you can teach speed. Like 10 years ago, people thought you were just as fast as you were going to be. Came down a lot to genetics, which there is a piece of that, but there's also a lot of room to grow and develop within that, get better technically, develop the right type of force production in the right direction, and understanding how to sprint. And you can see massive results from that. So number two that we saw was, at first we weren't, our eyes weren't necessarily open to this, was, our injuries and overuse issues went down pretty dramatically as our athletes got faster, and we were continuing to expose them to high speeds over periods of time and even in season, right? So touching those high speeds in season, because in most sport, other than track and field, you're not really going to get an opportunity to drive the nervous system or keep the tissue ready for that high of intensity of movement. So between our, hops, skips, bounds, sprint mechanics, sprinting, reactivity training, like we just saw way better results of the athletes, and they were staying healthier, and truly began to understand that, if the only intensity metric that you're measuring is strength numbers, you're leaving a ton of performance and quality out the window. This turns into, now our sessions when athletes come in is we spend 30 to 35 minutes on speed development and sprinting. And then the rest of the session, like 25 to 30 minutes on, some lifting and accessories. And a lot of times those accessories are designed to point back towards, how do we improve speed? How do we get athletes faster? How do we open up ranges of motion, keep them healthy? And then our strength work, is designed in the same way. So everything kind of is centric back to speed. The faster we've gotten athletes, as a good friend Tony Holler says, is, rises the tide of all the boats. So increasing an athlete's capability to create force quickly and be reactive is going to up the levels of all their other attributes as well. We have really strong athletes, even though we don't really, spend as much time on strength as you might think we do, just because those adaptations are systemic, and they're making big changes in their ability to recruit muscle fiber and move quickly. So again, we just kind of realized like we were getting athletes strong, but in the context of sport, it wasn't really carrying over. And I think that's a big thing that coaches miss at all levels. And it's not easy though. So no blame there, as it's hard. You really have to dive in. You really have to spend a lot of time. So that was one of the main things we noticed. It wasn't really carrying over, didn't apply in the context of sport. And again, since then we've been, breaking record-breaking scholarship opportunities for athletes in Pocatello, in a small town. We're in Idaho. There's like 60,000 athletes. And number two, the athletes love training. They love being here. The outcomes are better. They're having fun. We're able to gamify speed. We're able to develop speed, develop strength, and mobility. So we kind of went full swing, and you'll see that at the high level of collegiate now. When there's good strength and conditioning coaches, they're on the same page as us. Like I've traveled around. I was at the Houston weight room, Houston basketball, spent time at UCLA. I've spent time, with professional athletes and combine training. And, we're hitting the nail on the head here in Pocatello, which is huge because we want to put Pocatello on the map. So hopefully that gives you a little insight into how our training is developed. If you're a coach and you have questions, let me know. There's so many more levels to this and conversations that we could have. If you're a parent, hopefully it gives you some insight into where we came from and where we're going. We're going to continue to push the ability for our athletes to compete at a high level. And if you're listening to this and you're interested in learning more, just hit HansenAthletics.com. Follow us on Instagram, HansenAthletics. We're on every social media platform. We've got a free blog. We've got, obviously, this podcast. We have some free education resources out there, as well as some consulting. So, again, appreciate you guys. Thanks for making this dream of podcasting come true. And I appreciate all the people that listen. And I hope you guys have a great week.